this morning as we are delving into what it takes to manage an effective job search campaign. As we look at everything we'll cover this morning, there's a great deal included. So we're going to be looking at this from a high level, and I just want to refer back to the point Jody was making about the Career Gateway program, because that is where you have an opportunity to delve into a lot of this content in a much deeper fashion. I also will be sharing at the conclusion of my presentation links to AARP, and AARP has a plethora of job search related resources online. So again, as we move forward, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I will stop periodically to respond to those. So let's get started. Today we'll be delving into how you can use your existing skills, work-related skills, in new ways. Also, ways in which you can expand those skills educationally. We'll talk a bit about your personal brand and how you can distinguish and differentiate yourself from others. Networking, which is probably everyone's favorite task to complete. And then we'll touch briefly on ways in which you can update and, most importantly, age-proof your resume. So, as we all are keenly aware, these are unusual times, but in the best of times, of course, job searching can be very frustrating, and also having to deal with the unknowns can also put one off, if you will, in terms of just comfort level or lack thereof as you're going through this process. A lot of things have changed and are continuing to evolve with the job search process, so we will be zeroing in on those. But at the core of what landing a new job is about, it's about having skills that fit the needs of a hiring organization. So as we talk about skills, there are two categories of skills: hard skills and soft skills. And oftentimes when we hear the word skills, or when we think about our own skills, we tend to think about the hard skills. And these would be technical skills or skills for which you have certifications or a degree, etc. Those types of skills also tend to be very measurable, whether it's measurable from a degree or certification perspective, or measurable in the context of how you have applied those skills in previous positions. Conversely, soft skills are those skills that are oftentimes viewed as being more vague. Persuasion and negotiation, analytical thinking, judgment, reasoning, decision-making. These are all examples of soft skills. Now, interestingly enough, employers are looking more and more for individuals who have demonstrable soft skills that fit within their needs. So it will be important for you to step back and think about what your unique soft skills are, because the hard skills can be a matter of how do you complete very specific tasks, and what are those specific tasks that you need to complete. It could be using technology, or in today's world, AI, or what have you. Your soft skills are much broader in terms of the application of all of your skills within a particular corporate or organizational culture. So these are examples of soft skills. And I will share a mistake that's commonly made when individuals are interviewing. It's very easy to throw on your resume this terminology. I'm excellent with teamwork. I'm extraordinarily adaptable, etc. What makes the difference is not only for you to identify your strongest soft skills, but for you to identify examples of how you have applied those soft skills in previous roles, or perhaps in a volunteer capacity, etc. So it's not just enough to say you have these soft skills and to reflect these soft skills on your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Rather, you must have examples of how you have applied these soft skills, those that are unique to you. Because in my line of work, I hear again and again that employers are skewing more when it comes to making that final offer. They're skewing more to those individuals who have soft skills that will add value to their organization. So not only should you be taking advantage or taking inventory of your soft skills, but it's also looking more broadly at your skills. Again, the world of work is changing almost literally as we speak. Therefore, it's important to think about the skills you have that can be transferred. And by the way, this is another reason that soft skills are so important. So you want to take a look at your skills that can be applied in a different company, different organization, skills that can be applied in a different industry, skills that can be applied perhaps somewhat differently. So, for example, communication may be a skill that you have. You may have been in a role where you were required to do quite a bit of writing, for example. Well, you may be looking at a job in a very different industry, but one that may require a great deal of communication with clients and customers. Well, that writing skill can potentially be transferred to being able to communicate effectively verbally with customers and clients. You see where we're going here? Because again, what you're striving to do is be able to have examples that will help employers understand how you've applied skills in the past and how you can apply them to meet their needs. Certainly, technology skills, you need to make certain that you're very clear about all of those. And just a comment about your technology skills. Employers make assumptions that, for example, you are familiar with Word and you're able to write and communicate leveraging computers, obviously. 20 years ago, that was not an assumption. So in other words, you don't have to put those on your resume. They are assumed. But you also want to make certain that you are clear about skills that you may be striving to develop. And what you're striving to do there is to be able to demonstrate that you have the ability to learn and adapt in an environment that is rapidly changing. And again, examples are essential as you are engaged in both the networking, but most importantly, interview process. You do need to make certain that as you are engaging in the job search process, that you have a growth mindset. And when we talk about a growth mindset, we're talking about being positive, making certain that we are not confusing speaking on our own behalf, that we're not confusing that with bragging or self-aggrandizement. Again, you are the one who knows you best. And if you're not prepared to communicate your value, then you are already falling behind the competition. So when we talk about a growth mindset, Again, it's the ability to be optimistic about your skills, the ability and willingness to share your skills and ability, and to be flexible. This whole job search process can be either demoralizing, or it can be, you can feel optimistic about an opportunity for a change. So part of what can make a difference is not only looking at yourself in an objective fashion and evaluating your skills, evaluating what you have to bring to the market, but also looking at opportunities to learn and grow. So here are some examples of informal learning options, and we have more today than ever. Again, stellar universities across the country have online courses for no fees. And then, of course, you have organizations such as Coursera, for example, where, again, you have the opportunity to take courses online. And as you're interviewing, don't hesitate if you are in the midst of some type of certification courses, or that you have taken courses in new areas to help build new skills. Don't be hesitant about sharing that. You also want to consider alternative ways of learning new skills. And again, here are more examples. Don't shy away from volunteering. Again, not all organizations have the opportunity for you to learn new skills in a volunteer capacity, but many times there are ways that you can contribute in a volunteer capacity while learning. For example, here we reference local shelters. Well, yes, local shelters do oftentimes feed and clothe those who are disadvantaged. But oftentimes they also have administrative tasks that can be augmented and are augmented through volunteers. So again, don't overlook different ways to learn new skills. And then, of course, there are more traditional options as well. There are times where community colleges will partner with employers around specific courses that will help the employer maintain a steady stream of employees. So again, make certain that as you are looking at community colleges, for example, determine if they have relationships with specific employers that will streamline your ability to be considered for new positions. So I'm going to pause here. Jody, do we have any questions thus far?
Yes, I mean, there was a question from one of our participants who says, when you talk about including examples, do you mean also on the resume or just during the interview and in the cover letter?
What a wonderful question. You want to do all three. Now, certainly when you are crafting your resume, you do your initial resume, you want to have the strongest examples included. But we're going to talk about the length of the resume in a few minutes. So it's very important that you're not writing a thesis, if you will, on your resume, but you do want to include, I find the rule of three is helpful. So at least 2 to 3 examples on the resume. Now, when you are interviewing, you want to be selective about your examples, because then you want to make certain that you've done your homework about the organization and about their need, so that you're able to use examples that align best with a particular organization's need. So for example, if you're interviewing with an organization that is trying to overcome difficulties, for example, perhaps they've been losing money for the past 5 years, you want to skew your examples to those that would support your ability to help them grow and develop. Another example would be if you're interviewing with an organization that's had quite a bit of turnover. that usually is a red flag for some other problems within the organization. So you want to make certain that you are, again, using those examples that would relate best to that. So yes. And then, of course, within your cover correspondence, you wouldn't have as many examples. But again, keep in mind that cover correspondence will be targeted to that specific job opening. So much like your interview, you want to include those examples that are most relevant.
Great. And then everyone would like you to, if you could go back to your education slide for 30 seconds. It had
Oh, yes.
Coursera and,
Mhm.
and some other sites, and they asked you if you would be able to share websites for the free courses, if that is, and if you could do that maybe afterwards or
Okay,
share,
yes. Mhm.
that would be great because
Okay,
people,
for the online courses.
yes,
Yes,
exactly,
good.
exactly.
Okay, great, great.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you. Now we're
Thank
going to
you.
move on to your personal brand, and perhaps you've heard this terminology in the past. Your personal brand is no different than company brands, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, uh, Charmin, what have you. Uh, what you're striving to do with your personal brand is to think about yourself in a way that, again, is unique and distinguishes you from others. So, who are you, if you will, in the context of reemployment? Keep in mind that there are thousands of people in the job search process as we speak. And it's not easy for employers to determine who is the most appropriate person. The more knowledgeable you are about yourself, the greater your ability to determine ways in which you align with a hiring organization's needs. So, one of the most important characteristics of that personal brand is to create what's known as an elevator pitch. Sometimes it may be referred to as a 30-second commercial. But again, what this, excuse me, what this statement, if you will, does is it describes who you are in a way that speaks to your ability to add value. Remember, hiring is not occurring just to fill a seat. There has to be a demonstrable need an employer has before they choose to create a new position or fill an existing vacancy. So here's an example of an elevator pitch, if you will. Roberta is a sales management professional. She has a wealth of experience, exceeded sales goals, and again, look at the soft skills that she includes here. People describe her as reliable and dependable. But then she goes on to say, as illustrated by my long-term relationships and consistently exceeding client expectations. So do you see how she takes those soft skills and speaks to them in a more tangible fashion? And then she goes on to speak about her tenure and how that speaks to dedication, adaptability, etc. So this is a strong example of an elevator pitch. So what you're including in that elevator pitch is, who am I? What do I do best? How have I made an impact? What sets me apart from everybody else? And how can I make a favorable difference for this company? Remember, it's not just a job. It's your coming on board to have some measure of an impact on the organization. So it will be important for you to develop your own 30 to second elevator pitch. Practice it. Stand in front of the mirror and practice it. When you're meeting with networking contacts, practice it. And practice it so that ultimately you're able to tweak it and refine it based upon who your audience is. If you've ever interviewed before, I'm sure one of the first questions you've received is, "So, Roberta, tell me about yourself." Well, how do you think Roberta will respond? She will respond with her elevator pitch. Okay, so this is an elevator pitch. Practice it, practice it, practice it. Again, loads of examples and information on the AARP website about this concept of defining yourself, defining your brand, which is a natural segue to this whole concept of networking. Networking is not schmoozing. Networking is not trying to have someone give you something. Networking is about connections, about relationships, about communicating with others so they can speak on your behalf. Networking is also about gathering information so that you're learning more about the company well beyond their website, that you're learning more about the people within the company beyond what you're reading on LinkedIn. Networking is about gathering information and building relationships. It's important that you connect within your industry. And again, there are a wide variety of ways in which you can do that. And again, today, I guess one offshoot of COVID is that there are more and more opportunities for networking online. So you're not having to just go somewhere, but there are conferences, there are industry associations, etc., opportunities for networking. Again, there are many colleges and universities and some high schools as well that have a great deal of alumni events for networking. And then, of course, social media. I think back to the days before LinkedIn. It was challenging staying in touch with former colleagues. It was challenging learning who was at specific companies you were interested in. And I'll talk more briefly about LinkedIn, but social media is a foundation of that whole networking process. Primarily LinkedIn, but to a lesser degree, Facebook or X or Blue Sky or what have you. But there are, again, ways in which you can stay in touch with your industry, former colleagues, friends, etc. And in the context of social media, please, please, please make certain that you're keeping it professional. Go back and determine if you need to whatever degree is possible, if you need to scrub any of your social media postings. It matters. We see it in the headlines. Well, we have in the past where people have been terminated because of social media postings. Again, there are opportunities to build your credibility. So you want to make certain that you have a professional persona, if you will, online. And don't think for a minute that hiring authorities are not going and checking you out at various social media sites. It's important to leverage your existing connections and to grow your network by asking them who else you need to be speaking to. This, quite frankly, is a very good practice to have in general. So now is a good time to hone those skills because, again, it's not just about someone who knows someone who's hiring. It's about helping people better understand your brand so that as they become aware of a vacancy, they can speak on your behalf. Let's take a minute to talk at a very high level about LinkedIn. I'm not going to go into great detail because, again, I can assure you with the JCA, they have a number of resources there about LinkedIn, as again, does obviously AARP. But LinkedIn is the largest professional networking site. It is designed to help you. I mean, the whole growth of LinkedIn has been about helping you build and develop a virtual network. As you are going into LinkedIn, it's important that you create a profile. And I hope that most of you, if not all of you, at least have a basic profile on LinkedIn at this point. You do need to be on LinkedIn as you're looking for a job. If you choose not to use it once you land, that's up to you. But job search, you need to be on. You want to make certain that you are leveraging the help section of LinkedIn, particularly as you're creating your profile. We have found that help section to be very useful as far as helping you make certain that your profile is comprehensive and making a very positive statement. And though you may not want to do it, we have found that having a photo is very, very important. It doesn't need to be a professional looking photo. But again, you do need your picture on LinkedIn. And the custom URL that's on LinkedIn is, again, when you go into help for LinkedIn, they will describe there in very specific terms how to develop that custom URL, because you will want to include that URL on your resume. From a networking perspective, there are groups on LinkedIn. Many of them are related to functions. So for example, if you're an HR professional, if you're an accountant, biologist, et cetera, there are any number of groups that are very effective resources for networking. There are also, what you will also find on LinkedIn, there are alumni groups, not just from academic institutions, but also from many companies. There are alumni groups. These are all ways in which you can reconnect with people whom you've known in the past and develop new connections. As you are leveraging LinkedIn, make sure that when you are reading articles, that you comment, that as you are on LinkedIn, that you are posting brief articles, et cetera, that you are reposting articles that you read. If you read something interesting from one of your contacts, repost it and make comments. Again, actively engage. I'm going to pause here. Jody, any questions at this point?
Yes. Okay. Individuals, they wanted to know, do you need to be an AARP member to use the website resources?
No, there are some that require membership, but there are others. There's quite a bit of information there and any number of resources that do not require membership. Great question.
Wonderful. Is it a bad thing to not have a social media presence as a job seeker?
Not necessarily. It's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you are on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a professional social media site, if you will. But in terms of Facebook, X, Blue Sky, which is fairly new, obviously, but no, that would not, unless you are targeting a position that involves social media, of course.
Right, of course, yeah. They employers will go, or our prospective employers will go and look at your LinkedIn profile, and if you are non-existent, they will wonder. So it is
Absolutely.
good, but and to have an active I mean, have it not just something that's been sitting around unused for like 3 years, but yeah.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And can you explain a little, people said that, can you talk a little bit about Blue Sky? They've never heard about Blue Sky.
Okay, Blue Sky is a new social media site. It's similar to X, formerly known as Twitter. So, and I will confess, I've only been on it a couple of weeks myself. I've been
Mm-hmm.
reading about it for, I guess, the last couple of months, but
Mm-hmm.
I finally decided to stop reading about it and check it out. So I can't share that much about it, except it certainly seems to be attracting it certainly seems to be attracting quite a few people. Some people are migrating toward it and away from X, but because they are very similar. But that's what Blue Sky is.
Okay,
Again, I
great.
who knows how important it will become.
Right, and you have to wonder, will it be something that job seekers will use as opposed to Twitter? Will it be
Mhm.
something that maybe our more seasoned job seekers will use as opposed to Twitter? We don't know what
Mhm.
will develop.
Exactly. And I'll just make a comment on that very quickly. As I mentioned, the landscape of work is changing. And you don't have to jump on board with every new thing, but it's useful to be aware of the new things.
Exactly.
So I just want to share that because again, there is a new and different landscape. So job boards are an important way that uh, people identify vacancies. But let me be clear, job boards are not the be all and the end all. Job boards would be, uh, again, or aggregations where many companies will post their job openings. Again, they may or may not be current active job openings. And you may find that you're spending a lot of time on job boards and coming up with nothing. My favorite, when I'm reading about people looking for jobs, one of my favorite lines that I've read repeatedly is, I've sent out 350 resumes to job boards and I haven't heard anything back. Not unusual. Remember networking? That's what's going to make the difference. So, for example, LinkedIn has a very active job board. There are postings of all manner of jobs all around the country, etc. Yet, what you want to make certain you do, respond and move on. Make certain that you're only targeting positions that fit your demonstrable skills. And you can set up with various job boards alerts when those jobs become available.
Terrific. Thank you.
Recruiters, again, can help you. Recruiters can help you land positions uh, within companies. So, for example, there are external recruiters and internal recruiters. Internal recruiters work for the company, they go to work there every day. And if you have responded to an online job and there is an interest, typically the first person you will hear from the company will be one of their internal recruiters. External recruiters, on the other hand, work for specific companies. So, for example, Northrop Grumman may hire Manpower Group to help them fill a specific position. And Manpower Group will then go out and look for people who meet that criteria and then turn those resumes over to Northrop Grumman, just as an example. You should never, ever, ever pay anyone to find you a job. There are unethical people out there who will promise you that they can find you a job for a fee. No. Ethical recruiters are hired, ethical external recruiters are hired by companies. They are paid by companies. So just the caveat. in our world of fraud, make sure that you are never paying a recruiter. As you are working with recruiters and as you begin to migrate toward interviewing, there are very difficult interview questions. One of the most difficult questions, ironically, is tell me about yourself. Thus, your 30-second commercial. That helps you prepare for that. But there are other questions that can be difficult as well. And my experience has been that what we determine are difficult interview questions varies based upon who we are. So for example, if it's about salary, well, what are you looking for? If you're getting that question in your first interview, your response needs to be, well, quite frankly, I'm not in a position of being able to respond to that until I learn more about the position. And then if you're in your second or third round of interviews and you get that, well, what are you looking for? Well, before we go there, why don't you give me an idea as to the range for the position? See where I'm going? So again, it's about being creative, upfront, and honest. And there are a plethora, again, of responses, typical responses that can be useful with the questions that you find to be difficult. Despite the fact that we are back in the office, despite the fact that we are now mingling among one another, companies have latched on to virtual interviews, not just your initial interview. Don't be at all surprised if you have 2 or 3 rounds of interviews that are virtual. Make certain that if you are conducting a virtual interview, you test your technology, just as we're looking at where we are today. Again, there always can be glitches, so test that out. Make certain that you are dressed professionally. And again, think on your feet. One of the advantages of virtual interviews is you can have little sticky notes posted around you so that, again, you can have keywords and phrases that you want to make certain that you integrate. And as we move forward, before we wrap up, we want to talk about your resume. And as you can see, there was a lot to cover this morning. And it's interesting because we have as our wrap up your resume, because quite frankly, your resume is essentially a marketing document. If you are not prepared in terms of understanding you, understanding your brand, understanding your demonstrable skills, the resume is not going to mean anything. I've found that the resume is a great opportunity for you to really think through how you will communicate as you're networking, how you will communicate as you are interviewing. So as we're looking at the resume, make certain that it is no more than 2 pages. You may have a lot to say, but I can assure you, those who have the ability to hire you are not interested in reading that. It needs to be summarized. Use action words. Make certain that it's not, I was responsible for the development of. I developed, I created, I initiated. Again, focus on quantifiable achievements. It doesn't have to be, I increased sales X%. It can be, we expanded our client base, or I expanded our client base from A to B. And then in our world of age discrimination, you do need to be sensitive to the fact that age-proofing your resume is important. One of the reasons you can hold your resume to 2 pages is because you only go back 15 years or less. Anything beyond that doesn't mean you don't discuss it when you're interviewing, doesn't mean you don't discuss it when you're networking, but what you are putting in front of an employer is what's going to be most relevant. You want to make certain that you're including a current email provider. If you have AOL on your resume, scratch it out immediately. You want to have a Gmail or similar account. No graduation dates. Again, if technology skills are relevant to the scope of work that you're engaged in, needless to say, you want to highlight those. You do not need to lead in with your summary statement by saying, over 40 years experience, over 35 years experience. I have found that there are oftentimes where people feel, well, that's a good thing. I have all of that experience. Well, not necessarily. There are many times where someone will see 30 years experience laid out at the top of your resume and immediately move on to the next person. And then you want to make certain that you are using keywords associated with the position you are responding to. And yes, you do need to refine your resume for every specific position you are responding to. So those are some highlights of resume development that can help you make certain that you are at least making it through the first screening, so that, again, you don't have someone looking at your resume saying, now, how old are they? You know, they had been working 10 years before Ronald Reagan even came into office. You know, you want them to look at you. You want them to look at your skills, ability, and the ability to add value. So here are some resources for you to consider. Again, with AARP, we're looking at aarp.org/work. And keep in mind, there is also, again, a job board on AARP. So think about how you can use your skills in new ways, identify educational opportunities. But I want to say, most importantly, it goes back to that concept of the growth mindset, being able to be positive, to take the time at the front end and to really familiarize yourself with you, the product. Jody, any other questions at this
Yes,
point?
we do have questions. Can you put up that, the previous, yes, the resources so people are anxious and writing that down. People are also asking, who can they contact at AARP about these programs? Is there someone that they can reach out to if they're interested?
No, I would, the most effective way would be to go on the AARP website.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the most effective approach to take.
Okay. Is it important to still include a cover letter? I know what my answer is, but I'd like to hear yours.
My experience is yes, include it, unless, again, it states do not include it, or if there's no means by which you can include a cover letter. But again, we're not talking about a blanket cover letter that says, I'm a great and wonderful person. No,
Right.
It's a cover letter that is specifically targeted to the position you are responding to and only includes your skills and abilities and how they align with the employer's needs.
Exactly. Perfect. Very, very good. And oftentimes, our feeling is that if you if they don't say don't include it, do, because you can elaborate.
Yes.
And so and sometimes they use it as a writing sample, so it's a good thing to include if you can. And just when you were talking about age, years of experience, I have 33 years of experience. What we say in the career gateways, all that indicates is that you're old, and that so you don't need to say
how true.
Okay. Another question is, recruiters are saying 3 pages resume, while some employers want all your experience in high school. I think you addressed that by saying really no more, try to keep it to 2 pages. Okay. Can you elaborate on the use of AI in matching your resume with the job post? How employers are using AI technology?
Oh, absolutely. And most employers are using AI technology to screen resumes as they come in. So a person will not even, in many instances, I would say the majority of instances, a person will not even see your resume unless it has made it through that initial AI screening. And you can't game the system because you do not know what criteria the employer has identified that they want to, where they want to prioritize responses. So that is the most consistent and frequent way in which employers are using AI. Now, one other quick comment, and Jody, I don't know if you cover this in the Career Gateway, but there are more and more AI sites that
Yes.
promise to build your resume for you.
Mm.
And they're not bad, but I have looked at many of those sites. I put my own resume in them just as a test, and sometimes they make up information
Right, right.
or they
Yes, you have,
draw inaccurate conclusions.
exactly, and you have to be very careful.
Right.
Right. I mean, we do have, just to play on what Catherine's talking about regarding AI and ChatGPT, we are now offering a day-long program called Becoming a Cyber Savvy 50+ Job Seeker, where we talk about how to use ChatGPT and AI more effectively in your job search, not to like write your resume or your cover letter, but how it can enhance the whole job application process. So, and we talk about job scams and privacy issues on the internet. So it's a great new course, and then we just expanded to a day-long program. So that's another, that is a part of the Career Gateway and tech classes that we offer afterwards. So it's a hot topic. It's really important to understand what this is all about in AI, because it's not going away. It's being used more and
It's
more.
not.
It's not. So we might as well embrace and understand it. So very important. Let's see. Someone said they proofed their resume, they age proofed their resume, but then HR demanded dates. I think Catherine was talking about just like taking out dates of graduation. And they don't need to know when you graduated. It's not important. All they know is that you graduated with a particular certificate. You're not talking about taking out the dates of your
Employment.
employment.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. Yeah.
And then, yeah. And then someone said it's 25 years experience in my field too much.
Well, it's not that it's too much. Again,
Mhm.
it's what you're putting on the resume. And again, your resume is just a high level synopsis, if you will, of your professional experience. So again, it's not that it's too much. And I often caution people, just because you have not included something on your resume does not mean that you don't talk about it. So you may find that you were with a company for 6 months and found that, oops, this is not the place for me. You don't need to include that on your resume, but it doesn't mean that you don't reference it if it's relevant in an interview. And if you are completing a formal application after you've received an offer, you doesn't mean you don't include it, because there are times where you have to complete an application and it's pretty extensive. But remember, the resume is a synopsis.
Exactly. This is I mean, and do we have, I know we're like up for time, but this is a question that I know everyone's like thinking about. What is the rule of thumb for functional versus traditional chronological resume, especially when you have significant progressive experience, such as greater than 15 years with the similar capabilities?
Absolutely. And I have found that the functional resume can be an effective tool to use when you have very extensive experience, because what a functional resume is, it's sometimes called a skills-based resume, where you are leading in with your accomplishments. So you would have a profile statement, then you would have several accomplishments, 4, 5, 6, what have you. But your accomplishments that demonstrate your skill and your success within organizations is what you are leading in with. And then you move into a very brief chronological listing of where you worked, what your title was, and the dates. But what you're striving to do with your functional resume is engage the reviewer with your successes.
Wonderful. Well, Katherine, do you have any time to jump into chat to answer any answer question?
I do. I
Okay,
do.
perfect. This was terrific. There was so much information, and Katherine was giving a broad overview, and she was covering a lot of information. So we so appreciate you here today. We are at, I'll tell you, we are at 10:59 in the chat, and if you can, it's talking about do you include dates for positions and then downward. So if you can address, there's a lot of questions that weren't answered, and and you can answer them directly to the individual.
Excellent.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Katherine.